So there appears to have been a bit of a shift in Georgia after Republican Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue did not immediately back President Trump's call for $2,000 direct stimulus payments. So a new Trafalgar Group poll shows Democrats Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock have taken slight leads against their opponents. Obviously, these battles incredibly contentious for these two Senate seats in Georgia. Here to break down what these latest polls mean, if anything, our editor-in-chief at The Real News and host of Working People podcast, Maximilian Alvarez, and also co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kosloff. Also, always great to see you guys.
Thanks.
Great to see you, Crystal.
Marshall, the reason that I decided to cover this poll is because I always forget how to, is it Trafalgar? I always screw up the pronunciation of it. But these are like the Republican pollsters. They're the ones who had Donald Trump winning and actually ended up in certain states being closer to accurate with the general election in 2020 and with some of the Senate races as well in 2020 than other pollsters. So I've been sort of operating under the assumption that Republicans are probably going to win both of these seats. But when I saw this poll result, it actually made me sit up and take notice.
Yeah, and I'm glad you sort of started with the addendum of why are we trusting this poll specifically after everything we saw in November. Right. But I think it could signal something. I would still say we should definitely assume Republicans are probably going to win the seat, especially given the fact that without Donald Trump at the top of the ballot to turn off the suburban voters that he turned off, it seems like that isn't going to be an issue. But it's also pretty clear here there's a lot of enthusiasm, especially given these Senate battles. If you were trying to find a situation with Mitch McConnell in the checks to illustrate how important control of the Senate's going to be, it would definitely be this right now.
Yeah. Max, what do you make of this data point?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty much with you and Marshall that I've been very much kind of presuming that Republicans are gonna take this. I think that just the dynamics are kind of getting more interesting by the second, especially with this kind of stimulus debate going on in Congress and the kind of musical chair shuffling that's happening between, Donald Trump and I think Perdue must have seen this like poll because he changed his tune pretty quick, didn't he? Like with tweeting out support of the 2K stimulus. So like it's interesting, but I guess here's my kind of genuine, honest take, right? Is in many ways, like Marshall was saying, this feels like a referendum on Mitch McConnell and his death grip on the Senate. We've seen how Democrats handle referenda on Mitch McConnell before. They always blow it. And sometimes it looks like they blow it so miraculous, so spectacularly that it has to be on purpose, right? I mean, I don't want to think like a conspiracy theorist. That's just the impression I get from watching them trip at the 50-yard line every time they get a chance to kind of challenge Mitch McConnell's power. And I don't really have a whole lot of faith that they're going to be able to do this. What I do have faith in, right, is because we know that through the Democratic Party establishment, they're going to raise a bunch of money off this, which they already have. They're going to give power to spend that money to a bunch of brainiac consultants who don't know anything about working people, who are going to spend all that money primarily on TV ads and internet ads and stuff like that. And they're not going to have a real ground game. And that's how they usually lose. What is interesting is that the ground game is really being made up by regular people, by community organizing groups, by unions, right? The union presence in Georgia, just like in Arizona, just like in Nevada, is staggering. Unite Here, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, affiliates of the AFL-CIO. There are a lot of unions who are not just kind of raising money for TV ads, but who are making calls, who are sending postcards, and who are reaching out to not just union members, but to other communities as well.
That's actually a really great point because some of the places that we've seen, and Nevada has been one consistently that have kind of bucked the trends and been better for Democrats even in down years. It's directly because of that, because they have well-organized union presence and still a very strong union vote. And so they're able to deliver that ground game and deliver those votes ultimately come Election Day. And Marshall, just to add some more numbers on top of this, the other reason that Democrats feel maybe optimistic is that you've had an incredible early vote turnout As of Tuesday morning, 2.3 million people had voted. This is I'm reading from Politico here. Democrats buoyed by the strong early vote numbers, and especially because they show black voters making up a larger percentage of the electorate than in November and higher early turnout in Democratic congressional districts in the state. Of course, just like in the general election, we should fully expect that Republicans are planning to turn out in droves on Election Day, just as they did in 2020. But that is an interesting dynamic. And I guess my question for this race, you both mentioned, the stimulus checks and how that is playing into this, is like, what is this race actually about? What is it actually going to turn on? Because I have a feeling that it's much more about these massive national trends than much really specific to Georgia itself or these two candidates themselves.
Yeah, I want to respond to something Max said in my answer to your question, specifically the part about Democrats blowing it at the last second. What's unique in this race, if we're looking at those races where Democrats blow it, it's situations where you have these magical candidates who are supposedly able to overcome the fact that these are usually deep red states. So this would be South Carolina. This would be Kentucky. There's this, Crystal, Kentucky, like the notion that Amy McGrath was going to magically beat Mitch McConnell in 2020 was absolutely insane. Always. And what was unique about Amy McGrath and these other candidates is they have an ability to generate national energy that totally had nothing to do with the local dynamics on the ground. Georgia, to your point about the national trends, is this unique situation where, despite the fact that I don't think anyone's excited about John Ossoff, I would not describe him as a magical candidate at the local or the national level. This race is so clearly the final battle in 2020. And I think that's actually moved down to the grassroots and the national level. So this is one of those few cases where on both ends of both parties, that dynamic is synced up well together. So it's not really about the checks, but it's really about power. And that's what the checks battle seems to mean to a lot of people.
Max, what do you think's at stake here? Like, do you think we're going to get dramatically different results out of a Joe Biden administration if he has this narrow one vote majority versus if they're in a narrow minority position?
Not if left to their own devices. I do not. And I think that that this is something that other voters and other organizers who are really pouring a lot of effort into Georgia right now understand as well. I think that Marshall's exactly right, that this does represent kind of like a raw battle for power as we understand it. It's a very kind of clear distillation of the fact that by flipping these two seats and with having Kamala Harris kind of cast a tying vote, Democrats can finally kind of get what they want and push their agenda, and they won't have Mitch McConnell to kind of stop everything that they want to do. That's actually, as precedent tells us, that's not a position the Democrats want to be in. They like having Mitch McConnell to blame for not doing the things that they frankly don't want to do, but will say they want to do to get elected, right? And we, the people, this isn't our first rodeo. We've seen how the Democrats do this time and time again, and yet people are still pouring their energy into this because I think that what a lot of people realize is that this is kind of a necessary puzzle piece to put in place in order to have the leverage that we're going to need to not push Biden left, but to force the Biden administration to abide by its campaign promises, right? I mentioned before the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, who have been doing a really great job pushing, the Pass the PRO Act campaign, along with a lot of other unions. And I actually have an episode with some members from IUPAT coming out next week about this. But, the vice president, Jim Williams, kind of put it very bluntly to me. He was like, we've learned as unions time and again not to trust the powerful to just give us what they say they're going to, right? We are not going to just try to get Biden elected. We're not just going to try to get these Georgia runoff elections won for the Democrats, but we're going to do that so that they cannot say, oh, Mitch McConnell won't let us pass the PRO Act. And then if you say that you're not going to pass the PRO Act on the Democratic side, you have nowhere to hide. And then the unions are going to work with other community organizing groups to really hold your feet to the fire. This is something that a lot of union members, a lot of working people are telling me that is what they are invested in right now.
Marshall, real quick, I'd love to hear your answer to the same question. What do you see as at stake in these Georgia elections?
Yeah, so look, when Joe Biden didn't blow out President Trump and Democrats didn't take the Senate outright, as many of the polls we were discussing earlier said they would, the dynamic entirely changed. So, like, I hate to, pour water on progressive viewers' flames, but this Joe Biden presidency is no longer about ambitious, sweeping policy reforms. This isn't 2009 where there's a fair case to be made that President Obama could have gone much further than he did. There's just not a lot of things that are on the table. What is actually on the table is the degree to which Mitch McConnell could actually execute control. So, for example, it's obviously, to Max's point, there is a degree of center left. Oh, Mitch McConnell, so we can't do things we didn't want to do anyways. That's definitely a fair point. But it is actually true that there are plenty of nominees, even nominees that aren't even far left, who Mitch McConnell would not let through. There is a situation where you see a combination of Mitch McConnell, Joe Manchin wielding a lot of power there. So you really have to think about that too. And if we're looking to the stimulus debate, look at Mitch McConnell's decision to tie the check stimulus debate to a poison pill like the Section 230 reforms, which everyone knows are not going to be wrapped up into this. So there are these really big, very specific, very unsexy situations where it is going to matter. So if I were on the left, I would definitely not mistake my frustration with the lack of sweeping progressive change for the fact that Mitch McConnell will most certainly hamper a lot of very basic things that you probably care about.
Yeah, lots of unsexy situations here in Washington, D.C. Marshall, very apt point there. Gentlemen, stick with us. We will be right back after this.